5 professional divers were sucked into an oil pipe they were trying to repair.
Only one survived, but years later, there have been no charges filed, no admission of guilt, no compensation paid to the families.
We're doing a recap of Pipeline, Left to Die on this episode of So Much Crime.
So Little Time.
You know, by now, Jeff, lots of people have fallen off the wagon of their New Year's resolutions. People are maybe uninspired. They don't really know where to put their energy, where to put their money, if they have any left after the holidays. But I have an idea. Put your energy into So Much Crime, So Little Time. Go to patreon.com/so much crime, so little time. And that way you will get your heart filled with joy by supporting a podcast. You will get your head filled with hilarious humor with some of our bonus clips, and you will fill your brain with fantastic knowledge in the time machine clips. So why not make that your New Year's resolution? That's patreon.com/so much crime, so little time. Thanks. Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Dee.
I'm Jeff, and before we start, a quick warning.
Warning.
This episode will have spoilers for Pipeline. We're going to discuss the whole series.
If you haven't listened yet, check out our preview episode on this show. It's the one before this one in your feed.
And you can also get a link for Pipeline in our show notes.
All right, before we jump into our recap, let's remind ourselves about this podcast and about this crime. Okay, so this podcast was released in the summer of 2025. The host is Isabelle Stanley, and there are 6 episodes in total, each in and around 40 minutes long. Not too much content to cover, but Jeff, tell us a little bit about the story that we hear about in that first episode.
Yeah, so we discussed in our preview episode, that first episode, and that basically, we were back in February of 2022. There was this group of 5 professional divers. They went to fix an oil pipe. This was off the coast of Trinidad and Tobago. But something went wrong, and they all 5 divers got sucked into the oil pipe that they were there to fix. They were basically left there to die. An autopsy performed later says that they may have been alive for as long as 39 hours. So 4 of these men died in the pipe, and we hear in that first episode from their parents, from their wives. But there's a 5th man who survived. And he, at the end of the first episode, claimed that all the men could have been saved. And that was where we left things. So yeah, we went on and listened to the other 5 episodes. Dee, I said in the preview that this show got into some of my biggest fears as a person in this world. Episode 2 went there hard. Where do you want to start, though?
I don't know. I think I'll start maybe with something I said in the preview episode. I alluded to the fact that this was a Daily Mail podcast, and because of that, I was skeptical of, or wary of how salacious it might go with covering this story. And I was really surprised. I thought it didn't lean in to the salacious element. There were some things I think I continued not to love, but, you know, there were some sound effects and I don't know, some of the additional elements I just think were too much when the story is so harrowing in itself and you've got so many people who are so close to the story speaking. I don't feel like you need the additional sound effects, but I think that's a personal preference really. But I thought Isabelle Stanley did a fantastic job and of like putting together a story that was very victim focused, but kept it moving the whole time. I really thought it was really well put together. So I kind of just need to start off by saying it surprised me.
All right. Yeah, I was going to ask you about that. I think that's pretty much our recap. Yeah, nailed it. Good job.
Nailed it.
No,
and next week on...
I guess maybe to build off of your point, I agree with what you said. I was thinking about what you said in the preview as I was listening to the rest of it, and I did think that some of the things, like the music, were a little much. The sound effects were a little over the top, but I think that's sort of a minor thing against this story that I thought was just so compelling. I thought Isabelle Stanley was a very solid host. I think part of why she did so well was because she did seem to spend so much time talking to the parents, the wives, even the children, like some young children. And we heard all of that. And I question, like, is this sort of salacious in a way, or sort of like, exploiting these folks' pain and misery? And I didn't think it was. I thought it was helping us really understand that these men weren't just sort of like these kind of blank figures that were involved in this crime. Like they were men with parents and children and wives, and I feel like we got a sense of who they were.
Yeah, and we definitely did. But like, I think more so than that, this podcast seems to, and the reviews that I'll get to later seem to say this as well. It seems to highlight issues that were not made public, like the families being left outside
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
offices while the rescue that was not happening, in case anyone from my voice didn't get that, was happening, or the plan of it was happening, with no food, with no water, with no access to like a toilet or to comfort. That's cruel. That is cruel. So much of this podcast and this story is cruel, but that just it felt like there's no good reason to have done that to families that are already in turmoil. I'm not saying that there was good reason to leave them in the pipe, but I think there's absolutely no reason to leave the families outside. And it just highlighted from the get-go how the families were not the priority.
I think that's true. I do think that raises an interesting point of something you mentioned there, of the way they treated the families was horrible. And I think we got to hear that. Why they didn't go and rescue these men, the answer partially seems to be just like corporate negligence, bad decision making, incompetence, some variety of that. There does also seem to be a part of would have been incredibly dangerous to do, and they didn't
Oh,
want to risk
absolutely.
additional lives. And
Absolutely.
I don't know that this podcast gave that much space. I don't know that that was really the point, though. I think you could have approached this story and given more space to, well, what would have happened if they sent other men into that pipe, or they the act of trying to rescue these men led to 10 more people dying. Like that would have been a different type of incompetence, a different type of negligence or recklessness.
No, I think no, I actually don't disagree with you. I don't know that they gave it space, but she did mention at the end of every episode that she tried to contact the people involved, the government officials, and also a lot of the heads of Paria, to give them space to tell their side, and they didn't. So
That's true.
she's going off of what she's hearing. And so what she's hearing is, yes, there was people who are willing to try and rescue them. Was it a case that maybe the best, like the safest thing to do wasn't to rescue them? Yeah, but they didn't seem to try hard enough to get there. And I think the other point that I would say, and this is really highlighted, there was no accountability. And you know what drives me up the wall is no accountability. If this was a case that they were like, we wish we could have done something different, like that's not what they said. Was it the chairman of Paria, when he was on the stand? He was asked, how do you rate management of that night, Paria's management of that night? And he said, excellent. Like, even if you're like, I don't want to be culpable, I don't want to have to pay money because you're a prick like that, maybe. But even if that is the case, excellent? Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
You're right. I'm not going to defend the oil company here or ever.
no, but I
In
hear
any
what you're
situation.
saying. There's an element of it. I think that's what I was saying about the families being left outside. There's an element of some actions are, I feel like I could give space to hearing the why. I don't know if I would say they're justifiable, but I could give space to hear the why to try and understand it. But leaving the families out for that long, I don't know. Like, I can't fathom what reason there was for that.
Well, and I think obviously you find out after the fact that these men could have been alive for 39 hours, and they maybe didn't know that, although it does sound like they heard the tapping. And you had the one man, Christopher, who did make it out alive and knew how he left them and knew more or less where they were. And it, like, I could see, I guess maybe my last thought on this particular point is, so in episode 3, we've heard Christopher's story. That's episode 2. In episode 3, we hear about these other attempts at rescues, but then the Coast Guard shows up and they basically, like, with guns drawn, don't let anyone go back in. And I think I was searching for any sort of justification for, like, why that would happen. And I guess the only justification I can think of is, well, it could have felt like people were recklessly trying to attempt a rescue. And it's so, I mean, this world is fathers and sons and family members. And I could see people endangering their own lives to try to rescue someone else. And someone with some authority, maybe it's the Coast Guard, saying, no, stop. But that's a small part of this broader story of, yes, the mistreatment of the families, and then the years of denying responsibility or any sort of accountability, or that any mistakes were made. Yeah, so I mean, the broader story here, I think, is that. But I don't know. I guess I was just like, I was trying to figure out, like, how do these people live with themselves, knowing that these four
Up on their
men,
hill in their gated community.
yeah, okay, sure,
I think that was it, wasn't it? When we went through episode 6, I think it was, there was this just like, we're just driving. And we're driving up now to a very different area. Or are we
yeah,
driving back down? They're driving through to like very different areas. You know, I feel like often we allude to race in this podcast. It seems to come up a lot. Unfortunately. But in this case, it felt like wealth came up and the
yeah,
socioeconomic divide came up, and it wasn't used too much. Like, it wasn't hyper focused on, but it was there. It was very clear that it was there. And I don't know, I felt like that, even that scene and the way you can depict it, like I could see it in my eyes. Like, I haven't looked it up. I don't like to look at pictures before we chat, but this to me was like,
wait, what would you not want to look up? What picture did you not want to look up?
I don't usually look up pictures of podcasts until we're here, and then I might look them up and like react when we're actually recording. Did you look up any pictures?
I did. I mean, the picture that comes up the most is the picture that the 5 of them took on that day before they went into the pipe, because that's the one that was referenced in that first episode. So that picture's all over the place if you search for Trinidad oil disaster or whatever. There are also plenty of like drawings, kind of like diagrams of like what it would have, like what the situation was in the pipe, like how big it was relative to the people, what the like
Oh
air
my
pockets
God.
were. There's lots of that too.
I thought it was fascinating to hear about the Delta P.
Yeah,
All of
the
like,
change in pressure.
yeah,
Had you heard that term before?
like I've maybe, like, it wasn't crazy new to me. I knew what Delta meant, and I knew like like I guessed when they said Delta P, I was like, oh, pressure. That makes sense.
Let me ask you this, and I don't remember this from our preview. I feel like I didn't understand exactly what was happening, like what they were,
mm.
how they were fixing it in that like room. Was that clear to you from the start, or like that Delta P explanation helped me understand it better?
Yeah, no, I think it all made sense at that point. I think Christopher's episode 2, also,
Yeah.
like, definitely from the pipe perspective, kind of explained the different air pockets and things, which was like harrowing. I don't know. Anyway,
No,
again,
well, we should talk
a
about that.
really well done episode, but so hard to listen to, which I hate saying, because like, oh no, it's hard for me to listen to. Like,
This man
you know,
crawled for his life out of a pipe.
yeah.
But on the Delta P thing, yeah, I think like, so effectively this pipe was stopped up with a balloon, like a heavyweight
Mm-hmm.
balloon. And
Mm-hmm.
theoretically, once they fix the pipe, they could deflate the balloon, remove it, and there's an equalized pressure but the pressure wasn't equalized because something
There
happened on
wasn't
the other
enough
side of that
oil.
balloon.
There wasn't enough
Yeah,
oil. Too much oil was taken out. Yeah.
we don't know exactly why, by whom, but obviously like that was a key screw up, right? Like that's the key cause of this accident.
Yeah.
Um,
And I hated to hear that like there was any question over Kaz's involvement, Kaz Senior's.
yeah,
The idea of him being up on the stand and going through it all, like in comparison to the excellent, do you know, the emotion that came out there was just actually that's a good comparison or juxtaposition. Would that be the right word to use here
sure.
between the chairman of Paria and Kaz Senior, who was like LMCS, like they were slightly held accountable, but he had his son involved, so like it's just a different. I don't know.
Well, and like sure, and I get like this is the way the world works, right? Like the rich get richer and the poor suffer, and that's how things go all over the world and in all types of industries, especially in the oil industry. But that bit in the end of episode 6 where Isabel is with Christopher and his family and they go to the beach right by his house. And you realize first of all, he doesn't go to the beach anymore. He doesn't go in the water anymore because obviously he's been this it's too traumatic for him, but also like he lives within sight of the platform where this
Yeah,
all happened. Like he's that close to it, and just like how and like his hearing his daughter's sort of
his
lack of
daughter
understanding.
asking, "Why don't we go to the beach?"
I mean that hit really hard.
I think the other elements, they did that so well, particularly in maybe the last 2 episodes, but definitely in the last part of episode 6, the survivor guilt. I think it would be quite easy for people to say, "How lucky are you to have survived?" But I think the guilt of his survival is just so real.
Well, the guilt of his survival, just in general, like being the one who survived. It's the same thing. I mean, you hear these stories of like the one person who survives a plane crash or something, and how the weight of that just lives with you
Mm.
forever. But in this situation where these were men that he was so close to, and what we heard about in episode 2 where they were all trying to get out together and he had to make that decision to leave them behind. And those decisions as he came across those air tanks of like they were sharing air tanks, and then like he had to push forward and he had to make a decision on which way to go, right? Like he made so many decisions in that pipe with that, like in the dark, with the oil fumes, with the, not knowing if he was going the right way, if he was going to run into like a dead end. And I think then also realizing that not only was he the only one who got out, but that they were still alive for a long time after
I
he got
know.
out. And just like, and this is not on him, but I'm sure if I were him, I would think like I could have done more. I could have done more in the moment. I could have done more after the fact, but he couldn't. I mean, he was incapacitated afterwards, right? Like he was so severely injured. There's nothing else. From what we know, there's nothing else he could have done. But
But
to
he
live
couldn't
with
have done
that,
anything even from if he knew what was going on. If he wasn't fully, his phone wasn't taken or whatever, because nobody would let him in.
right? But I think that like hearing episode 2 and hearing that very visceral version of his story of what went on in the pipe, of how he got out, of that time in the pipe with the other men and trying to figure it out, like that alone was so haunting. But then to contrast that, yeah, with what you hear in episode 6 of just living with that survivor's guilt. I mean, that's going to be the thing from this podcast I think sticks with me. Christopher's story, Christopher's guilt, but then also like, hearing from these other family members. Your point at the beginning of this discussion about the victim focused nature of this podcast, I think is to me the biggest point to make about this. Like that's where the center of the story was. That's where it should have been. I think that's where it was. I think that's what works so well about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, like, obviously it's like coming out at a time, or maybe it's always this way, but where, because we haven't discussed the election yet at the end, but like it's
Ugh,
coming out at a time where people are like sick and tired of governments and the rich taking whatever they want. And maybe this is like a positive place in social media, I think at least people are feeling like their stories might be told. I know nothing is changing yet,
You know,
but
if this,
maybe.
yeah, if this story needed one other element, it's a politician promising to do something on day one, getting elected, and then saying, "Oh, actually, no lawyers. It's harder than it seems. So I'll get to it eventually," and then never getting to it. That like happens so many time and again. Politicians all over the world making promises out of their ass. People believe it.
Yeah, there's so much.
Anyway, did you think, one last question I had for you. Did you think that the podcast in any way overinflated its own self importance?
I feel like you're referring to when they were like, we thought we were going to end it here, but then it turns out that there was like this rush. And at the start, I was like, are they going to claim it's all about them? But then it wasn't Isabella Stanley that was claiming that. It was actually, was it Christopher?
That it was about the podcast
Mm.
coming out? Yeah, I think you're right.
It was Christopher that was saying that. And so I don't know. We're never going to know. But whether it's a case that it just, the story was gaining traction again, and that's because of the podcast, I think it's not I don't think it inflated its own importance because it wasn't like laying it on thick.
No, I mean, it was a thing that they drew attention to. I think my answer to that would be probably not. But I was just curious what you thought.
I mean, of course, your answer wouldn't be like no or yes, because like probably not gets you on the fence. But like, I don't know. But yeah, I don't think so. So Jeff, come here. Would you recommend this to a friend?
Oh, yeah. I think definitely. I think this is, I think this is a strong podcast overall. I think the host is very good. I think the story is compelling. I also think, I mean, we haven't really said this directly, but it's one of those stories I just feel like is important to share, is important to hear, even though these themes of like, yeah, the rich and the elected officials and corporations and governments are bad. Like those aren't new ideas, but I think this is a story told in a way that I haven't really heard before. It's such an unusual story that, yeah, I definitely would. What about you?
Yeah, I definitely would too. I definitely would. I just thought it was so well done. And again, like if you hadn't chosen this, I would have thought Daily Mail not really interested. So this is why we don't choose together. I think. Before we do wrap up though, I would like to say there's a few reviews that I found of it. Lots of glowing reviews. New incredible podcast. I just started listening. This is from Shannon in Madrid. I just wanted to let everyone know about this so you can listen. I haven't seen any posts about it. I don't remember any news articles about this story, so I'm listening with no knowledge, and the production and storytelling has been incredible. If anyone else has any similar recommendations, please let me know. People are talking about how like this is my worst nightmare, but also definitely listening. People recommending similar stories of people getting stuck, which I'm
Oh,
not ready. Yeah, I know.
is there an example?
Yeah, there's one.
Not that I want that for us, but just curious.
I need you to fact check this. Apparently, it's called Nutty Putty. It's about a caver who got stuck in a cave.
Oh, yeah.
The podcast is called Quite Unusual. Came out in February 2024.
There's actually a lot of podcasts about the Nutty Putty Cave incident.
And lots of other people saying they don't remember hearing any stories about it. Basically, if it was for white men, this would have been a different story.
This Nutty Putty Cave one. In late November 2009, 26-year-old college student John Edward Jones became trapped upside down in an uncharted and perilously narrow section of this cave.
Some criticisms that I read about was some people felt like the last few episodes could have been combined. I don't agree, but apparently that was the thing. And also there was a bit of a lack of expert input because there wasn't like a doctor or medical expert on to provide any sort of different point of view, which I think kind of might have been similar to what you were alluding to, Jeff, that like maybe if they had a medical expert on like how any sort of rescue just wouldn't have been safe.
Yeah.
That would be interesting. And
Yeah,
some
I
people
agree
were
with that.
actually criticizing this because they felt like the greedy oil companies' narratives. Obviously, a lot of listeners were driven to anger by that, but some reviewers were noting, well, this is pretty similar to the ethics of the Daily Mail themselves. So,
Of like going after greedy corporate types.
yeah.
Like we should
Um,
feel sorry for the corporate greedy types, or I don't understand.
no, I think the point is, how can you put this story out and want positive reviews if the Daily Mail itself,
Oh, like is like a biased source.
because of their greed?
Oh, their own greed.
Hmm.
Oh, like they're hypocritical.
Yeah. Sorry. It took me a while to get there because I'm trying to read stuff as well.
Sure. I don't know about the Daily Mail. Maybe that's a fair point.
I do think, like, say on Apple, it's got 167 ratings and it's a 4.8 out of 5. So I feel like the story was told very well. That's what I'll
Yeah.
keep going back to.
Yeah.
I think Isabelle
Okay.
Stanley did a great job.
I agree. I agree.
Well, you listeners, let us know what you think. Do you agree with Jeff and I that this was a really well done podcast, or could you see any holes or anything that you didn't like about it that we haven't touched on? Please let us know. Leave us a comment on this episode on Instagram, Spotify, TikTok. Thank you so much for your continued listen into the new year of 2026.
Dee, next time, I know I brought you Pipeline, but I'm going to bring you another one. 2 in a row from me. I'm just
So greedy. Go on.
going on. My New Year's resolution is to not let you get a pick. But I want to ask you, as a way of setting this up, Dee, who is your favorite celebrity?
Who is my favorite celebrity?
Yeah.
That's a very broad question.
Okay, let me narrow it. Who's your favorite celebrity that isn't a co-host of a podcast that you're on?
Yeah. Oh yes, that is exactly what I was unsure about. I don't know. I don't have a quick answer for this.
All right, who's a celebrity who's a big celebrity that you can name?
Taylor Swift.
Okay, that's a good answer. What would you do if you thought Taylor Swift was stalking you?
I mean, I think it would do wonders for the ratings of the podcast.
Funny you should say that. So Megan Walsh is a young woman who claims that she has not one, not two, but 3 stalkers, and one of them is TV's Olivia Benson, or Mariska Hargitay. That sounds pretty wild and probably isn't true, but Megan Walsh is someone who believes that and wants to tell her story. So we're going to be listening to a podcast called Cracks in the Fandom. This is a short series from larger podcast called Pretend. That is on the next So Much Crime.
So little time.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.